Hello, everybody. Welcome to MVP Tech Bytes. Today we have Kubaib. Kubaib, you're located in Dubai, right, as an MVP?
Hi, Taswar. Yes, I'm located in United Arab Emirates, specifically in Dubai.
Okay, great. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, myself, as I told you, Muhammad Kubaib. I'm a Microsoft MVP in enterprise mobility, so especially
Mm.
in Azure Virtual Desktop and Intune management. So I got awarded MVP in the last year. However, I'm
Okay,
working in this technology for the last 10 years.
cool. So we have an expert over here. So today we have a very interesting topic from you too. Basically, it's about the Azure Virtual Desktop Infrastructure (VDI). That's what we call it. So I wanted to ask you, what is actually Azure Virtual Desktops?
Yeah, sure. The Azure Virtual Desktop is a service from Microsoft. Basically, it is related to application and desktop virtualization,
Mhm.
which is hosted in the Microsoft Cloud. So basically, if you look into the traditional VDA solutions, we have many vendors. However,
Mhm.
it's all having some drawback related to the on-premise technology. However, when it comes to Microsoft Azure, it is purely built into the cloud, and which will have a lot of advantages over the traditional virtual desktop infrastructure. So, in a
Great.
nutshell, it
Mhm.
is your Windows desktop on the cloud.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
cool. So
Yeah.
so let's go over some of your slides. Let's see what's it all about.
Yeah, sure. So, as I told you, let's go into the benefit of virtual desktop, which is
Mhm.
specifically Azure Virtual Desktop. So, for the first one is simple to deploy and configure. So, unless our traditional approach, for example, consider the traditional deployment where you need to procure your hardware, so licenses, operating system licenses, and then the hypervisor license. So, the
Mhm.
things may take weeks to months. You need to
Yeah.
procure, and then they have to deliver, and some engineers will come to your data center, and so many things you require, and definitely it will take weeks to months to set up a virtual desktop infrastructure. However,
Mhm.
in Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop, it is just a fraction of minutes or hours, you can say. So you just need to get your subscription from the Microsoft, and then you spin up your VMs, and that's it. Like within a day or 2 day, and maybe within a couple of days, your solution will be ready, and you can give it to your end users. So that's why it is called as simple and very easy to deploy.
Cool.
So
So
the second, yeah, yeah.
in some ways, it's not like a V. Well, I mean, there's VMs that you could get within minutes, basically, but this is more like a virtual desktop to actually help consumers in some way, or like your department people to actually use the computer, right? If I'm correct.
Yes, exactly. So let me give you the use case. For example, a new staff joins the company. So basically,
Mhm.
for him to get a laptop, it may take 1 or 2 or 3 days. Let's say if your asset management doesn't have the stock, it may take
Mhm.
weeks to get him to a laptop. And once he gets the laptop, the IT team should install all the applications, etc. So that is also time consuming. So you need to
Yes.
set up all the profiles for him, Outlook profile and the application, etc. So instead of
Mhm.
that, with the help of Azure Virtual Desktop, so in Azure Virtual Desktop in the cloud, we already have the VMs and all the applications ready in that VM. So even if
Mhm.
if the employees can get his own laptop instead of waiting for the company laptop, he can use his own laptop, or he can use his iPad or tablets, and he can get into the VDA, and he can start his work. So there is no
Okay.
productivity impact, or on the day you onboard into your company, you can get him into the BAU, business as usual, and let him work. So this is one of the biggest advantage when it comes to Azure Virtual Desktop, and it will enable you that bring your own device, and you can work from anywhere at any device from or at any time. So this is the concept.
Okay. So in some ways, it's almost like a more secure option too at the same time, because it's like, let's say you're traveling and you're not allowed to take your laptop to somewhere, some countries, you could actually remotely log into your virtual desktop in some ways and still get access to your data of some sort.
Exactly. So basically, like you can access your data. See, at the end of the day, for user, it is just an application he needed and the
Yeah.
data. So as far
Mm.
as you're getting it from, if you use any device, for example, mobile device, like you wanted to see your SharePoint portals or your emails or some shared folder you need to access, so that you can
Mm.
access it via Azure Virtual Desktop using any kind of appliance which is having HTML browser support. So that's the
Oh,
requirement.
yeah. I was going to ask you, like, what are the licensing requirements for this, basically?
Yeah, so we will have our dedicated slides where we are talking about the licensing. So
Hmm.
before jumping into that, I want to, in a high level, I wanted to cover some of the great advantages of Azure Virtual Desktop. Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, let's go talk about simple security management. So for example, let's say if you have given a laptop to your end user, so there are
Hmm.
many vulnerabilities, or they can go to the internet. They can download a number of malware softwares, so that may impact your network. Right? For example, let's say I'm going to the home and connecting to my Wi-Fi, and I'm downloading some malicious softwares. Next day, I'm
Hmm.
coming to the company and connecting to my company network. Like there may be a chances of leaking these malwares and ransomware attacks. You got my point.
Yeah.
So we can completely avoid this with the help of Azure Virtual Desktop. So what we can do, so for the end users, we can give the Azure Virtual Desktop and they can work from anywhere, even though they're connecting to their own network or their Wi-Fi. There is the isolation between the VDA he is using and the local computer. So whatever it is in
Okay.
the local computer doesn't have any access to the VDA. So it is
Hmm.
completely isolated so that you can secure your endpoints and your data and your applications.
Okay.
So yeah, this is the advantage. And then we have a reduced cost with the pooled and multi-session resource. So this is one of the biggest advantages of Azure Virtual Desktop compared to other solution we have. So with Azure Virtual Desktop, you can have a multi-session Windows 10 and Windows 11. So as of today, if you take a laptop at a time, or you can only allow one user to log in, right? However,
Yeah.
with Azure Virtual Desktop, in one VM or one VDM, you can allow any number of users as far as it has having enough resources. For example, I have a one VM with Windows 10 or Windows 11. I can allow
Hmm.
10 users to that, and 10 users simultaneously work on that particular virtual machine.
Okay.
So this is the biggest advantages when it comes to cost saving, because you no need to spin up 10 virtual machines for 10 users. Instead of,
Hmm.
you just spin up one VM and allow 10 users to connect.
Cool. So it's
So
almost like
this
a
option
pooling
is
kind of a technique.
exactly. So
Yeah.
as of today, only we have this feature in Azure. So we do not have it on premise or any other cloud. So let's say
Hmm.
you are deploying your Windows 10 in Amazon or Google Cloud or on premise, you won't get this option. So this is only specific to Azure.
Hmm.
So this
Cool.
is one of the beauty. Then, as I told you, cost effective, and which is already covered, easy to scale. So it is in the cloud. You can, let's say if you need 100 VMs, or let's say some 100 users are joining your company in the next week, so you can easily quickly scale up. So as a cloud, there is no boundary for and limitations, right? So as far
Yeah.
as you have a quota on your subscription, you can spin up the VMs. So then the flexible. So it means that, let's say you wanted to use your virtual desktop for your contractor for 6 months. So after 6 months you don't want, so simply you can cancel that. So there
Hmm.
is no commitments like on premise. So in on premise you have to invest for the hardwares. However, after 6 months, if you don't want, still you have to be, you have to pay for the maintenance, and all those things. But that we have the flexibility here, that whenever you don't want the services, just cancel it. So there is no additional charge for those things.
So I
And
also wanted to ask that you said like easy to scale up, right? For example, that if you wanted to scale,
yeah.
like the cloud is going to scale. But what about scaling down, sort of thing? Like, I mean, let's say at nighttime you're not going to have that many people using that many, so you could. Are you able to limit the
Yes.
amount of VMs or?
Yes. This is a very good question. So Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop having its own auto scale feature. What it will do after 6 hours, like after business hours. For example, your workload is like your users are only working till 6 o'clock. So after
Hmm.
6, what it will do, it will check the sessions and it will shut down the turn off the VM so that your billing will stop. And
Okay.
in the next day morning, let's say automatically, like let's say your 8 o'clock is your business users are logging in, then it will automatically turn on the required VMs in the morning, so that
Hmm.
during the off peak hours or off business hours, you won't be get billed for the compute.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last one, sustainability. As you know, we have this global warming, all many things are coming up. So how it will add value here in sustainability? Because, for example, consider the on-premise infrastructure. Every 3 years or 5 years, you need to do the hardware refresh, and
Hmm.
the hardware, electronics things, and involved included in that. it will have a great impact on the environment, right? The carbon emission, etc., etc. However,
Exactly.
when you are going to the cloud, so you no need to worry about the hardware refresh. So because it is Microsoft taking care of the hardwares, etc. So for your company, you can lower the e-waste. As I told you, like it's a virtual desktop instead of the
Mhm.
lab. Like you are investing a lot on the physical endpoints. You can use this virtual endpoint, and you can reduce the e-waste. So all those things will add value to the sustainability and for our environment. So this is one
Mhm.
of the key points I wanted to highlight. So in a nutshell, these are the benefits of Azure Virtual Desktop.
Mhm.
So we'll move into the licensing, which you asked. So there are two parts for the licensing: one for the user access and another for the Azure infrastructure cost. For example, let's say I need 100 users to access the VDI. So I need two
Mhm.
types of I need to check two things here. One is the user rights, and another one is infrastructure cost. So the good news is, for example, let's say if you have Office 365 license, let's say E3, E5, or A3,
Mhm.
or F3, or Windows Enterprise E3, E5, or VDA or Education A3, E5. So then you are free to use Azure Virtual Desktop. You no need to pay anything extra for the license, and you only pay for the infrastructure cost. That's for the virtual machine and the disks. You are paying the cost for the licensing. Apart from this, you're not paying, so it is free for you as far as you have this Office 365 entitlements.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's consider our traditional VDA. So, for example, that we have many vendors in a traditional day.
Mhm.
For example, VMware, we have Citrix, we have Nutanix. There are many. So there, on top of it, compute cost, you need to pay a huge amount for your the license also. For each
Sure.
user, maybe $100, $150 you have to pay. So that cost is completely avoided as far as you have this E360 or O365 license. And in today's enterprise world, 99% of the company will have this license either for their
Exactly. Yeah.
security or teams or all other things. Yeah.
So my question is this like, okay, the virtual desktop pricing and licensing, I understand it right now, but like, is this like a more like a SaaS or solution or a PaaS, like software as a service or platform, or is it a infrastructure as a service that I'm receiving from Microsoft for this?
Yeah, good question. So we will jump into this where we have the complete architecture over here. So basically, to answer your question, it is a PaaS model. So where some part of the solution will be managed by Microsoft and some
Okay.
part will be taken care by the customer. So as you can see here, the middle part, which is having a web access and the gateway, broker, SQL
Mhm.
DB, and all diagnostics, these are managed by Microsoft. So basically, we
Okay.
call it as a control plane.
Okay.
Yeah. However, on the right side, we have a VMs, which is desktops, applications, and the Azure files, and then Active Directory.
Hmm.
So these are managed by customer because this will be deployed on the customer subscription.
Okay.
So yeah, and then we have a clients. Clients are nothing but just thick clients to be installed on the laptops, or you can use the browser also to access it. So here we need to manage only as a customer. I have to just take care of my VMs which is deployed in my subscription and the
Hmm.
application which I'm going to install it on those VMs, and then the Azure Active Directory and the file. So these are the things we have to take care. However, the control plane is completely managed by Microsoft. So this is how like we call this as a pass model, where some
Okay.
responsibilities with Microsoft and some with the customer.
So in some ways, it's almost like the middle part is kind of transparent to the customer, and what they see is actually I need to manage my Active Directory, which is very normal because you have your own clients, you have your own people that are working within your company, and you probably have some specific applications that you have. If you're a bank, you might have your own banking applications, and also at the same time, you might have certain files that you want to share. So all of that is managed by you as a customer, and you don't see the back end of it where it's actually diagnostic, making sure that everything is working well by you. And then you just have like clients who are going to be connecting to your virtual desktop in some ways. Cool.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I told you, yes, the VMs and those all the storage, etc. So that will be our customer's responsibility. However, when
Mhm.
it comes to the brokering, database, gateway, so it's all Microsoft responsibility, and it is highly available. And the disaster recovery for that part will be taken care by Microsoft automatically.
Sounds good.
So let's go into the types of virtual desktop we have. So as of now, let's say we have two types of virtual desktop. One is a personal and one is pooled. Personal virtual
Mm.
desktops are nothing but it's a one-to-one mapping. For example, I have 100 users. I need a dedicated desktop for each user. For example, a
Mm.
developer, they're
Yeah.
working on some tools like Visual Studio, etc. So they
Yeah.
need their own desktop. So for them, we call it as a dedicated desktop. However,
Mm.
there is one more called pool desktop. Pool desktops are nothing but, as I told you, it is not tagged to one to one. So, for
Okay.
example, let's say I have 100 users, so I may have 100 VMs. However, all the 100 like it's not a one to one tagging. For example, let's say if I'm logging in today, I may get VDA number one, and tomorrow I'm logging in, I may get VDA number 50, or day after tomorrow I may get VDA number 99. So it's a
Okay.
pooled concept. So now you may ask, oh, what is the main difference between, like, what is the advantages of pooled and personal? So personal is a cost, you need to pay more for this. Why? Because
Mm.
when you give personal VMs, you have to include this, so backups, etc., etc., for this. Because let's say the developer is saving all his data and the VM got corrupted, and it will be a trouble, right? So you need to enable backups and so many things involved in the personal. However, the cost effective one is pooled, where all the data whatever you save, let's say I'm logging into the pooled VM and I'm saving some data on the desktop. However, the data will be stored in the network storage. So
Mm.
irrespective, any VM you connect, each time it will redirect to the network and it will get your data. So there is no
Okay.
dependency of the data on the VM, so it will be on the centralized storage.
Okay. So in some ways, it's almost like the pooled one, as you mentioned, it's more like a lab environment. You might have students coming in and logging in, but their data is not on that computer physically. It's usually on a OneDrive or some other drive that actually has their data, and they save to it, and they could continue working on their lab environment or whatever computing that they're using. But when it's a personal one, it's almost like a developer who needs to save their data. They are doing some scientific stuff that needs to be residing on that computer and stuff. Correct?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely right. So then we have like single session and multi session, which I already told. So single session, it allows a single session on the VM. However, the multi session, as I told you, you can allow more users on a single VM. For example, let's say I have 100 users,
Yeah.
so I no need to create 100 VMs for them. Instead of, I can just create 10 VMs and allow 10 users in each VM, so that 10
Mm.
VMs can handle 100 sessions. So this is the
Mm.
beauty of a multi-session, which is only comes with Azure Virtual Desktop. So no other
No.
vendor supports this,
Yeah.
as of today. When it comes to prerequisites, so let's say the customer wanted to deploy Azure Virtual Desktop, so he must know
Mm.
that what are the prerequisites he required to spin up the Azure Virtual Desktop. So basically, you need to have a tenant and the subscription.
Mm.
Then you need to have an identity provider, so you should have Azure Active Directory and your Active Directory, and you need to have an operating system for your VMs. For example, let's say if you want to use Windows 10 or Windows 11, you should have
Mm.
that image be ready. Then appropriate license, as I told you, if you have E360 or 365 licenses, then it's already covered. So then we have a network connectivity. So yeah, this is very important. So you should have a outbound connectivity to your Microsoft cloud URLs. For example, let's say you have a subnet VNet. So
Mm.
from that VNet, you need to have a outbound connectivity to the Microsoft URLs, which is basically a control plane URLs we are referring.
So
So the beauty of, yeah.
here, I was just thinking like a identity provider. I have two questions here, sort of thing that would intrigue me. One is identity provider. Some of these customer might actually be running locally AD sort of thing. Can they actually replicate this into the AD that we saw earlier, or do they actually need to create a new AD? That might be one of the questions that customers might have actually.
Yeah, see, no need to create a new one, because in the existing AD you need to use this AD Connect, and you can synchronize your
Okay.
users and user objects to the Microsoft Azure Active Directory.
Okay. Second
So this is
question
the
is actually
requirement.
about network connectivity. So let's say that you're a bank and you have all of this stuff and you want to use AD. You want to make sure that your network connectivity is secure to actually using this cloud virtual desktop, right? Do you need to actually have VPN, or is it like automatically configured?
No, see, basically from my VNet, I need to have connectivity to the Microsoft Azure cloud. So the best way I can recommend with the security, you can use the proxy. So like
Okay.
every the infrastructure, the enterprise normally, for any outbound connection, nobody will allow directly, right? So it
Sure.
has to be over the proxy solution. So here
Mm.
also you can use the proxy, and you can have a connectivity.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. So then the finally we should have a remote desktop client. So this is
Mm.
to access the solution, or else you can use the browser as well, so that you
Mhm.
can connect and you can launch your applications. So yeah, that's end of this quick presentation. So you
I,
have
I
any queries before
I
we
do
jump
have a
into the
question
demo?
actually. I do have a question before we go into a demo. Is basically what is the advantage of using VDI over like Citrix or VMware? That might be one of the questions that customers might even have too. Is like, what's the advantage of?
Yes. Yes, the first biggest advantage, as I told you, licensing. Let's say
Yeah.
if you have a 365 license, then you no need to pay anything for the licensing part. It comes along with it. You just need to pay for your VMs and the storages you use. However,
Mm.
when you use the traditional vendor, let's say Citrix or VMware, you should separately pay for the licensing. So
Okay.
you can save a huge cost when you use Azure Virtual Desktop when you compare to the traditional solution like
Okay.
VMware Horizon or Citrix Zen Desktop, etc.
Okay. Great. So I'm really excited. Let's jump into a demo then.
Yeah, I'm here in the Microsoft Azure portal. So in the
Mm.
portal, so first we need to make sure the prerequisites. As I told you, we need to have a VNet, we need to have a subscription.
Mhm.
So this is my subscription. So I'm going to my subscription over here. So in this subscription, I'm going to spin up the Azure Virtual Desktop solution. So as you can see, Azure subscription one. So this is my
Okay.
subscription. And then I have a Azure Active Directory. And now I'm going to show the virtual machines. As of now, uh, as you can see here, we have one virtual machine which is called DC. This is nothing but my domain controller Active
Okay.
Directory. So
Mhm.
from this Active Directory, I have installed AD Connect. So that will sync all my users to the Microsoft Azure Active Directory. So this is the
Okay.
purpose of this virtual machine. So the remaining two you can just ignore. That is for the other purpose. Yeah.
Okay.
So then now I'm jumping into the virtual network. So as you can see, we have a virtual network here.
Mm.
So workload hyphen VNet. So basically, I'm going to use this VNet to deploy my virtual machines. So
Okay.
these are the VMs gonna deploy on this particular workload hyphen VNet. So inside this
Okay.
VNet, I have a separate subnet for my VDA, so that I'm going to show during the demo
Okay.
while creating the VMs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and then we have a remote desktop application. So this is on my
Mm.
laptop, local laptop. I already
Mhm.
installed this remote desktop client. So this is required to access the VDA, to launch the VMs which is in the Microsoft Azure cloud. So we
Okay.
will gonna see this use case at the end once we have the infra ready.
Sure.
So now I'm going to the search blade in the Azure portal, and I'm searching for the Azure Virtual Desktop service. So this is the place we are going to start the deployment. So once you
Okay.
launch that particular blade, so you land up in this page where we have an option called host pool, application groups, and workspace. So we are going to
Okay.
hit on the option called create host pool. Host pool is nothing but we are creating a virtual machines. So let's say
Okay.
I want to create 10 virtual machine or 20 virtual machine. The collection of that virtual machines, we call it as a host pool. Yeah.
Okay.
So once you click on this particular tab, which is create host pool,
Mm.
it will give you this particular blade. So where we need to select the subscription. So let's say if you have a multiple subscription, then you need to
Yeah.
make sure that on which subscription you're going to deploy this VM. So you need to select that. And then the resource group. So this is a prerequisite. So you should have a particular resource group on which you are going to keep all your VMs or your
Mm.
storage, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So in this lab, I already have a VDI hyphen workload. So I'm going to keep all my VMs storages inside this resource group. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we need to have a host pool name. So this is the friendly name which we are going to give it for the host pool. Let's say if you have a multiple host pool, for example, let's say you have a business unit for the call center, then you
Mm.
can give a name called AVD hyphen host pool hyphen call center, and then you have a HR or another business units. So
Yeah.
this is for just segregation. So we are just
Okay.
giving a name here.
Okay.
So
Like
then yeah,
identification of it.
yeah, this is the location. So basically we should not confuse here. There will be two locations for the Azure Virtual Desktop. First one is the control plane. As I told you, right, it's a PaaS service.
Yeah.
Some part will
Mm.
be managed by Microsoft. So as you can see here, so you can use one of the locations here. This is for the control plane, okay,
Okay.
not your virtual machine location. So virtual
Okay.
machine location will be different, that we will be covering in the next blade. Yeah.
Okay.
So as of today, Microsoft is having control plane in 8 to 10 regions, I believe. So which is listed over here. So which is near to you, you can select this, and you can move forward. Yeah.
Okay.
So in this
So it's,
example, I'm going to select I think East US, I believe. So let's see. Yeah,
mm,
and then I'll click next. Okay, so it will ask whether you want to add virtual machines over here. So let's go back. Yeah, here once I selected all these things, then the
mm,
next option is it will ask whether you wanted to add yeah, before jumping into that, this is very important, the host pool type, as I explained, right? So
yeah.
do you need personal or pooled? So this is the tab where you have to decide whether you want to go with the personal or pooled one.
Mm,
So personal is a one to one, pooled is one to many.
okay.
So this is the option here. So in this example, I'm going to choose pooled, and then it will ask the load balancing method. So there will be two types of load balancing method. One is breadth first, and the another one is depth first. So breadth first means,
Okay.
let's say you have 5 virtual machines and you have some 50 users. So let's say the first user may go to the first VM, second may go to the second, third may go to the third. So the
Okay.
load balancing will happen parallelly.
Mm,
However, there is one more option called length, breadth. Sorry, uh, let me see. Yeah, depth wise. Depth wise means, for example, let's say you have 5 VMs, and
mm,
you are thinking to allow five users per VM. Okay, so in that case, what will happen? The first 5 user will be logged into the first VM. So once the
mm,
first VM loaded with 5 users, then only it will allow the session to go to the next one.
okay.
Yeah. So this is the difference between breadth and first. So whereas breadth is the parallel distribution of loads, however the depth is it will be it's not a parallel. So it will as far as your first VM is fully loaded, then only it will give the option to log into the second or third VMs. So this is the main difference.
Exactly. So in some ways, it's almost like you have everybody jumping on the same machine first. Once it's full capacity, now let's move people to the second one. Or the other one, it's just basically
Exactly.
a sequential sort of thing. You go here, you go here, you go here, and loop back. You go back here, you go back there, you go back there, kind of thing.
Absolutely, yes.
Mm,
So then the limit. So this is also limit. So this is here we are defining the limit. For example, let's say I have 100 users.
mm,
So let's say I have 10 VMs. So in each VM, I can set the limit. For example, the first VM can support or 5 users or 10 users, 15 users. So this is the limit I'm going to set here. So in this example,
okay.
I'm setting 5. It means one VM can accept maximum of 5 connections.
Mm,
So this is the concept of maximum session limit.
okay.
So then once we have this, the next blade, it will ask whether you want to add VMs to this host pool. Definitely yes, because we don't have any host VMs at this moment. So we'll say yes. And the moment we say yes, it will populate the resource group, and which is already we selected in the first blade. And then the
Mm,
name prefix. So this is very important. Name prefix means what will be the name you're going to assign it for your VMs. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, if I example in this example, I'm going to enter it to AVD, just
Mm,
AVD. So it means that if I creating 5 VMs, the first VM will be AVD1, second will be
okay.
AVD2, and third will be AVD4. So it will be in that sequence. Yeah.
Okay.
So here the virtual machine location, this is very important. So this is where you need to choose your region. For example, let's say I'm located in UAE. So I have a Microsoft data center in UAE. So I have to
Mm,
choose UAE, because
yeah.
if you choose somewhere in US, it will be a it will kill your user experience because
Okay.
latency. So this
Yeah.
is very important. So you have to choose the region which is near to you.
Now,
So
que-
Microsoft has a beautiful link where you can check the latency from your location to the nearest Microsoft regions.
now
Yeah.
the question becomes, as in like the the host that we chose, which is running the brains of this thing, could be located somewhere else, but we could choose our VMs closer to us, sort of thing. Those VMs there, but the brain, because it's not constantly doing stuff, it could have a bit of a latency and it could reside somewhere else. Is that the case?
Yes, exactly. See, the control plane, it is just, at the end of the day, users are not interacting much with the control plane. So they
Hmm.
are mainly interacting with the virtual machine, which we are creating over here. The
Yeah.
control plane, it is just, it will check for the load balancing and the policies, all those stuffs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the reason that location doesn't matter. You can choose anywhere in the world. However, when
Okay.
it comes to the VM location, on which, because see, VMs means you'll have your applications. So basically, that should have a less latency from your location. So it is
Okay.
always highly recommended. You have to choose the region to deploy your virtual machine near to your office or near to your locations or near to your data centers.
Hmm.
Let's say you have an on-premise data center, so which is in UAE. So it is a bad idea to choose somewhere in Singapore or somewhere in
Yeah.
UK, as my VM location, because it will drastically increase my latency and the user will have a poor experience with your solution.
Hmm.
So this is what key takeaway here, that this is very careful. Always choose the region which is near to you. There is an article from Microsoft where they will give a link which is called as latency estimator. So it will help
Hmm.
you to look, decide which region you can deploy your VMs. So that is a good thing. So if somebody want to check that, they can go to that link and they can see their latency from the location. Yeah.
Okay.
So then we have an option called availability options. So as I told you here, once you select your location, the next option is availability. So this is very
Hmm.
important. Microsoft is having some option called availability zone and availability set. So I
Hmm.
always prefer to go with availability zone. Why? Because even if Microsoft is having an issue on one data center in a region, then still you have two more data centers. For
Hmm.
example, let's say you're deploying 10 VMs. So it is always a bad idea to deploy all those 10 VMs in a single data center, right? Because if
Yeah.
that data center is having some issue, no one will be able to launch your VDA. So it will be a
Hmm.
totally a production outage. So
Yeah.
instead of that, what you can do, always select the availability zone, and then you split your 10 VMs across the available zone. For example, as per Microsoft, in each region they will have three zones. So it means
Hmm.
three data centers separated by some distance. So for example, let's say some flood or some earthquake happen in one zone, it won't impact another zone because each zone will be separated with 100 or 200 kilometers. You got my
Hmm.
point?
Yeah.
So this is the main reason. Always choose availability zone when you deploy your VMs, so that even you have a catastrophic disaster or anything, so it should not impact other VMs sitting in another zones. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, in this since this is a demo, I'm just selecting no redundancy required. However,
Hmm.
during the production, always use zone. And then the security type. So you can choose standard, but if you have some confidential applications, etc., you can go with a trusted launch as well. So as you can see here, you have two options when it comes to security. The one is standard and another one is trusted launch virtual machines, because this is more advanced in terms of security. So let's say if you are running some very critical banking application, which may include banking PCI data, etc., and then it is recommended you go with the trusted launch, because
Hmm.
it will have more secure as compared to the standard one. Yeah.
Okay.
So since it is a lab, as I told you, I'm just selecting the standard one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then coming to the image type, this is very important. So under image, you can choose which image you need for your virtual machines. So either you can go with the Windows 10 or Windows 11. So this will populate it from the marketplace itself. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can choose your image accordingly. So as you can see, some images comes with the Office 365 apps also. So you no
Hmm.
need to install your projects or Visio or MS Office, etc., separately. So it comes
Okay.
ready-made. So you just need to
Hmm.
spin up and ask the user to use it. Yeah. So Microsoft is
Sounds good.
giving this flexibility.
Hmm.
However, there is an option called custom image, where you can create your own image and you can use it. For example,
Hmm.
let's say I have banking applications and I have some other business applications. So what I can do, I can separately create a virtual machine and install all the image applications on that VM, and then I
Hmm.
can convert that into an image. I can use that also. Yeah.
Okay.
So as you can see here, I did not use any marketplace. Instead of, I used my own image. That is why it is showing as 0.0.1, because this is the
Hmm.
VM version I selected. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have virtual machine size. So here, like, we can change the size. In this example, I just selected 2 vcp and 8 GB memory. However, if your workloads require more resources, you can change this, so that, let's say you're creating 100 VMs, so all the 100 VMs will be from that particular VM SKU. So this is
Okay.
also flexible. Customer can choose based on their requirement. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here, number of VMs. So this is very important. So let's say you wanted to create 10 VMs for your Azure Virtual Desktop. Then you have to enter the number over here. So in this
Hmm.
example, I just selected one because of demo. But in production, so definitely it won't be one. So let's say if you wanted to create 100 or 500, so you can create as far as your subscription is having the quota, and it supports that
Okay.
much limit. Yeah.
Hmm.
And when it comes to OS type, yeah, we have options here. For your virtual machines, you can either choose premium disk or standard STD. So my recommendation here, if you are running a workload which requires high IOPS, etc., then always
Hmm.
go with the premium SSD. However, if you feel that okay, your workload is not that much IO sensitive, then you can go with standard SSD. However,
Okay.
I don't recommend to go with HDD for any of your production workloads, because that is not recommended. However, if it is a non-prod or SCT, such an infra, then it's fine. You can go with HDD as well. So this is the advice here when it comes to the OS type, OS
Hmm.
disk types. Yeah. So this is related to the compute and related to the OS. Let's jump into the network part. So this is the tab where you need to choose our network VNet, and then we need to choose our subnet. So in this example, as I told you, I already created a VNet, which is workload hyphen VNet. So I'm going to
Hmm.
select that.
Okay.
So as you see here, so under that, I have a subnet called workload-subnet, which is 10.125.1.0/24.
Hmm.
So this is the subnet on which I'm deploying my VMs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, the network security group. So it's always good to have a NSG, which is a network security group,
Hmm.
which will
Hmm.
prevent you from unauthorized inbound and outbound connections. Yeah.
Sure.
So in this demo, I did not choose a network security group specifically here. Why? Because I already have a network group which is binded to my subnet. So no need to create
Okay.
separately here.
Hmm.
Okay, so yeah, this is related to the network, and then domain join. So this is very important because each VM should be joined to the domain, right? So here
Yeah.
we are going to provide the domain information. So what is the domain name, and what is the administrator account to join those VMs to the domain.
Okay.
So here we have two options. Either we can join to Active Directory, and it also allow you to join your VMs to Azure Active Directory also. So this supports both. So you can
Okay.
purely join to Azure Active Directory, or you can join to your Active Directory also. So in this example,
Okay.
I'm joining to my Active Directory. Yeah.
The DC that you created earlier that you showed.
Exactly, exactly. So this is the service account, which will have a permission to join my VMs to the domain, which is Adam under at the rate vdabus.site, where vdabus.site is my domain name.
Okay.
And then we have to specify the OU. So here we can specify which OU you want to keep that computer account. So we can
Hmm.
put that information. If you are not providing any information, then it will it will be stored under the default OU. Yeah.
Okay.
So in this example, let's say which OU. Yeah. So this is the OU. For example,
Hmm.
in my domain control, in my Active Directory, I have a domain called AVD, as you can
Yeah.
see. So I'm telling that all these VMs, let's say if I create 5 VMs or 10 VMs, should be created under this particular OU. Yeah.
Okay.
And the last tab is VM administrator account. This is nothing but a local account which will be created in that VM. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, Adam will be the local account which will be created in all the VMs which I'm going to create. So this is the last step, and
Hmm.
then you can hit here yes, because this is need to be registered under the app group. So we'll talk about app group later, okay, in the
Sure.
next demo. So yeah, that's it. So you just need to review your configurations here, and
Mm.
then it will take maybe another 5-10 minutes based on the number of VMs you select. So and it will create your virtual machine
Okay.
host pools. So as you can see, I'm reviewing and creating. So all the
Mm.
validation succeeded, like everything related to the VMs, such as my network, my resource group, and my
Mm.
SKU. So it will validate everything, and it will create a virtual desktop host pool. So yeah, it's done, ready now. My virtual desktop is ready. So basically, for example, let's say if you wanted to create 100 VMs, maybe hardly it will take 15 to 20 minutes. That's it.
Okay.
So this is
Mhm.
my experience. So it's very easy, straightforward. So once you have the VDA pools, as you can see here, it will give you the option that how many VMs are available. So since I
Mm.
selected only one during the creation, so it will
Yeah.
show one. If you create more than one, so it will show accordingly. So as you can see, this is my VM created. So as I told you, the naming convention, right? Hey VDA
Yeah.
0, it will start.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I'm creating multiple, so it will append accordingly. And
Okay.
then here it will show my locations, subscriptions, etc. So this is the dashboard. So once we have this VDA pool, the second thing is we need to assign this to the users, right? So now we
Yeah.
are going to talk about how we are going to assign this VM to the users. So to assign the VDA to the users, so we have an option called here application group, right? So we
Okay.
need to select one application group. So and then we need to provide the usernames. Let's say I have a test one user, test two users. So I need to define them here. So
Okay.
under this particular tab, I need to click on add. Then it will automatically pull it from the Azure Active Directory. As you can see,
Okay.
all the users groups in the Azure Active. That is the reason I told you you need to sync your users from your AD to the Azure Active Directory so that
Mm.
it can be displayed over here.
So you could technically
So
just say a group of like finance group could actually now access these VDI basically.
yes,
So you could just pick the group rather than pick, or if you want specifically, you could say that only Taswar actually has access to this machine or something.
yes, exactly. So I always recommend, instead of you, let's say if you have a huge numbers of users,
Mm.
always create a group and
Yeah,
assign it instead of adding one by one. It will
of course.
technically reduce your efforts in managing all those things. So since
Mm.
it is a lab, I just selected two users here. But in a
Sure.
production infra, always manage with the groups, AD
Yeah.
groups.
Mm.
So now we are ready. We have created the VDAs, and now we have assigned the VM to the users also. Now let's launch our browser or our application, which is RD client, and we will use one of the users to log in, and we'll see what is the behavior. Yeah.
Okay.
So here in my computer, I'm going to the URL, which is client.wvd.microsoft.com. So technically, this is the URL to access
Mm.
from the browser. Yeah. So first, it will do the authentication with our Azure Active Directory, as you can see.
Yeah.
So one point here, instead of just username and password, so you can also apply MFA and also
Mm.
apply other conditional policies also to secure more your infrastructure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I have logged in successfully. I can see one icon here called Session Desktop. So now
Mm.
I'm going to click this. So it will ask, one more authentication, and then finally we are in our Windows 10 Virtual Desktop. As you can see, this is
Cool.
my Windows 10 VM. Here I will have all my applications. Let's say my
Mm.
banking applications, my emails, my Teams
Yeah.
for the communications, etc. So whatever I work, I save. So there is no connection with the local laptop. So you cannot bring your data from inside the VDA to the outside, so that you can prevent the data loss as well here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So this is one way of accessing your VDA, and the other way, as I told you, we have an application, right, which I told you,
Yeah.
remote desktop.
Remote desktop.
So
Mm.
we just need to hit on subscribe. So it will again ask you for the authentications. For example, let's say, so you just need to subscribe, and again the same procedure. It will just ask you the credentials. So then you can launch your video from here. So let it launch. So as you can see, it is connecting, and then again you enter once again the passwords.
Mm.
So now finally, see, we are inside the VDA.
Yeah.
So the biggest difference between accessing the VDA from browser and from the application is, the application, the user experience will be more better than browser.
Mm. Mm.
So I always recommend my customer always use the desktop, this application, instead of the browser. So you'll have a much better experience when it comes to latency and all other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it related to demo Taswar. So that's all my from my side. So
Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you
over
so
to
much.
you.
It was a great demo. Like I mean, you learned quite a lot, like from DC connecting to a virtual desktop and like actually physically connecting to it. Thank you so much. We learned so I learned so much today from you too. So
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I'll put in your blog, and I think you actually create some videos, YouTube channel and stuff. I'll put those all in the show notes so people could follow you. Thank you so much, Kubaib. Like I really appreciate it, and hopefully see you next time. Then
Yeah, sure. My pleasure, dear. Yeah, take care.
take care. Thank you. Bye.